Hello, and welcome back to the Alpha Male Podcast, the podcast where we talk about what it means to be an alpha male, made in the image of our Creator, strong, dominant, and in control. God is number one. He is preeminent. I hope to recognize that in everything, and this podcast is no different. So let's get together, men, and be what we were created to be. Strong, dominant alpha males. If you listened before and you were man enough to listen again and come back, man enough to be part of the tribe, appreciate it if you hit like, subscribe, leave a review of the podcast. We'll roll into the main topic after the bio. If you want to skip the bio, and skip around 3 minutes and 45 seconds ahead of where the bio starts. First and foremost, I am a servant of God, a teacher, a preacher, a fisher of men. God is number one in my life, and everything that I do in this podcast is no different, and I don't apologize for that. A little bit about me in the background. I grew up, I guess what you would consider a heathen. Didn't grow up a Christian, but I grew up in the southeastern United States, what most would consider very poor. Hunting and fishing and shooting. Joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. After my combat tours in Iraq, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in law enforcement for several years in LAPD. I worked patrol assignments and more specialized assignments, where by God's grace, He got me through some nasty places in this world of war zones and some of the nastiest streets in the country. Not because I am better, because God chose to have mercy on me and had a purpose for me, and I'm thankful for that. After my time in law enforcement, I was a private contractor for federal government, for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify, doing private contracting work. I'm very much involved in guns and gunfighting. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I should say my primary MOS is in both branches of the military or infantry, as of one sort or another. Specialized infantry in the Marine Corps and an MOS that no longer exists. I started competition shooting even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I won my first gold medal even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I've been blessed by God with the talents He's given me to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. I've won most of my competitions in rifle and pistol, but I've also competed in archery and shotgun and even muzzleloader, knife throwing, hatchet throwing. I've competed in all that. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide. Like I said, I grew up hunting and fishing and shooting. I've done it to put meat on the table because I like to put food on the table with the talents God's given me. I don't apologize for that. I've done it as a professional hunter and guide. I've slain all manner of beast and guided for all manner of beast. Bear and wolf and elk and deer, mule deer, whitetail deer. I've slain ram and fallow deer and countless animals. And I don't apologize for that either. FBI certified, firearms instructor, NRA, and a bunch of other 3-letter government agency certifications. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Psalm 144. I've been blessed to be the commander of a tactical team, an SRT, special response team, in a large metropolitan area, where our primary job was to stop active shooters. But again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, called by God to share the good news, a teacher, a preacher, a fisher of men. With that, we will roll into the day's topic. All right, men. Today's topic. We're going to start with a few scriptures. If you don't like scripture, you're probably listening to the wrong podcast. If you don't listen to God, I wouldn't expect you or want you to listen to me either. In the Gospel of Luke, it is written, "Let he who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one." And in many of the Gospels, 4 or 5 times in a single speech, Jesus says to watch. Watch for tribulation that's coming. He's telling this to his disciples, to his followers, to watch for these great troubles that are coming. Another scripture I would like to quote, Psalm 144. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Similar to Psalm 18. It is God who arms me with strength for battle and makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He sets me on high places. He teaches my hands to make war, so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. And you'll see how that rather succinctly ties into today's topic, the modern Minuteman. You see, if you're American, and even if you're not, you may be familiar with the story of the Minutemen, the citizen soldiers, the militia that were around in the 1700s, that were part of towns and townships and municipalities all throughout this nation, not made up of professional paid soldiers, made up of citizens, of strong, dominant men who recognized it was their responsibility to have a sword, to be ready. The Minuteman comes from they were ready at a moment's notice. They weren't sure what troubles were coming, but they were ready with their rifle and their bag. They didn't have to get drafted. They stood up as men, and I would say as alpha males, to protect those around them, the women and the children, the elderly, the widow and the orphan. They stood up to protect and defend. A lot of times these were local. Again, they weren't a professional standing army like what we refer to as the Redcoats, the British Army, where they were all in the same red button-up uniforms. These men had what they had. But they had at least a rifle and some basic kit. Now, we often look back and romanticize times in the past. And obviously, I wasn't around back then. But I imagine many of these men were storekeepers and clerks, farmers, rugged frontiersmen and mountain men. Like I said, this wasn't their day-to-day profession. Now, you've heard my bio. I've been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life. Marine, infantry, Army, LAPD, private contractor, what many will call a mercenary. But even in times when I wasn't that, in the brief periods in between, I stand ready. I carry a sword. I carry a gun at my side. I carry some kind of long gun behind the seat of my car. I have EDC, everyday carry stuff. I have a bag, a little sling bag that, although it's made of ballistic nylon and not leather, would look very similar to something I imagine that many of the Minutemen of the past might look at and seem fairly familiar. They may have had some hardtack or a loaf of bread, and I might have some Quest protein bars in there. But the basic principle is the same. Are you a modern Minuteman? Are you ready at a moment's notice for whatever trouble comes? Are you ready to flee to the mountains, to the hills? Are you ready at a moment's notice for whatever might come? Well, nobody can see the future, not me, certainly not you. I mean, Jesus says in these speeches, no one knows the day or the hour. But he says many times, watch. Are you watching? Are you ready? I'd like to read that full run of the passage. We'll start this in Luke chapter 22. Then he said to them, but now he who has a money bag, let him take it, and likewise a knapsack. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. He lists some other things there. Resources. That they should have that. No, I don't know you and I don't know your situation. I'm not telling you to take food out of your kids' mouths. But if you have some extra income, And if you're not already, think about how you can be a modern Minuteman. Here in America, we're guaranteed the rights that we were given to be armed and to be part of a civilian militia. Whether it's just you or whether you have a group, whether you can form a group or be part of a group. Could be just you and a buddy or two. I'm not talking about just buying a gun. I'm talking about being a well-trained militiaman. Reading the Marine Corps Rifleman's Creed and being familiar with it and being confident that you can perform that. Getting out and practicing, forging yourself as a man. I'm going to talk about stuff, some kit. But I am not saying the kit is the most important. Being called, being protected, being chosen by God, having the heart of a warrior, training, forging yourself to be a strong man, spirit, soul, mind, and body in that order. Now let's talk about the sword. The sword was the offensive and defensive tool of the day in that culture and for thousands of years in human history. What is ours today? I would argue that it's a good, reliable, modern weapon with a reasonable rate of fire, capable of different tasks. I don't want to be too specific. More important that you train than what you have. Be good with it. It's the hits that count. And that could be the most common one in America is probably the AR-15. Your M4 clone, 16-inch barrel, good solid dialed-in iron sights or a decent optic with a couple of mags and a bandolier or a war belt that are ready to go, ready to grab at a moment's notice. Could also be a full-size battle rifle, a 308 semi-auto of some kind, whatever that is. We just talked on Gunfighter Life, the other podcast that we do here, one of the other ones, about the scout rifle. It could be a good scout rifle, a good fast-handling bolt-action rifle. I'm going to make the case that it could be a good semi-automatic or pump-action shotgun. That is, in my opinion, and some other people's opinion, the modern musket of the day. You can shoot a big lead round ball of 70-something caliber just like they did back in the day. You can put buckshot in it just like they did back in the day. You can do buck and ball. And basically do the same things much more accurately, much more dependably, a much greater rate of fire. Great for putting meat on the table, great for defense of the home, great for defense of the neighborhood. A good 12-gauge, 20-gauge, shotgun. The thing about those is they're generally far less expensive, especially on a used market or even new than an AR-15. I wouldn't want to put numbers on it, but for a few $100s, you could get a good, dependable pump-action shotgun. A couple of cases, even in the ammo apocalypse of the last couple of years, of shotgun ammunition and a couple of slugs and a couple of buckshot. And if hard times come, you can pretty easily convert those regular birdshot into more of a defensive weapon with, just regular candle wax, making a wax slug, or even just cut shells. You can look those things up. And for the amount of devastation you get out of those rounds for the price that they cost, they're kind of unrivaled. Am I saying that that's better than an AR-15? No, especially not if you're talking about like a battlefield scenario. But if you're good with it, it's certainly a formidable arm, and it's certainly more flexible than most other arms. I think part of that today also, if you can afford it and you're willing to practice, because it takes quite a bit more practice to be proficient than a long gun, is a handgun. Now, I don't care. I do a whole podcast called Gunfighter Life, but honestly, pick one and practice with it, whether it's a Glock 17 or the SIG 320 M17 or Beretta 92 or a 1911. Better to be the guy with the most basic Glock 17 or 50-year-old beat-up 1911 that you practice with and you can make hits with than the guy with a SIG Legion and a red dot optic that can't hit crap at 7 yards or 15 yards or 25 yards or 50 yards. I don't want this to turn into a gun episode, but I'm just saying that I would say that for your basic kit. and whatever you think a good ammo loadout should be. Pretty easy for you to go and look up, what a soldier's kit is, what a Marine's kit is, and decide on your needs, what you want. It may be different. I'm a little bit different in that I prefer running 20-round mags in my ARs and my other battle implements because I practice a lot with a pistol and speed reload with a pistol, and I can grab them the same way I grab a pistol mag, and I'm just more familiar with it. But what I'm saying is whatever works for you. You may want a cheap chest rig. Last time I looked, you could get the U.S. surplus chest rigs just like I ran in Iraq during the initial invasion or the bandoliers we had for super cheap, and they're super good kit. And what are AR magazines now? $8, $10, $12 for good mags? Have, 3 or 4 ready to go. Better to have 3 or 4 ready to go on a chest rig, a pack behind your seat, a box of 20 of them stashed somewhere in a safe where they're not going to do you any good in most likely scenarios. If you're out and about in town and there's a mass shooting at the mall, what are those case of 20 PMags back home in the safe going to do you? That 2,000 rounds you have stuck in a safe somewhere going to do you. I'm saying don't have that. I'm saying that should come after you have the ones that are there and ready, and the ones that you've practiced with to be proficient with if you have to use them. That could be for you, like we said, the shotgun. It could be a very inexpensive bandolier, and then a cuff that goes on the stock that holds a couple of extra rounds to speed reload from. It could be a war belt, which is my favorite setup. A couple of pistol mag pouches on it and a couple of rifle mag pouches on it. I think a good knife ought to be part of any man's kit. If all you have is a pocket knife, that's fine. But I would say, you're talking about being a Minuteman, I would really consider a good fixed blade knife, and it doesn't have to be expensive. The old Marine Corps K-bars like I used in the war, they're not super expensive. The Mora knives, even less so, and they're good knives. Standard, whatever, bushcrafting Mora knife. Could be a good combat dagger like the Gerber Marks or their clones. Gerber also makes some really good modern combat knives, and the models of those escape me. But I'm sure if you look them up, it won't take very long to find. In fact, I'm looking at my belt. Just coincidentally, it happened to be sitting next to me on the bed. My go-to is Tops Trackers. You can look those up. They're my go-to nowadays. That with the caveat that I live on the border of 1.8 million acre national forest and wilderness. As I've alluded to before, recently I had a pretty bad accident. Tore up an artery. By God's grace, he saved me. I very easily could have died from that. So, a medical kit. Tourniquets aren't that expensive. Combat gauze or just regular gauze is not that expensive. But some kind of medical kit, some kind of thing like that. Perhaps a cheap way to start a fire. Just as simple as a lighter if you want. You can build from there. And those space blankets, you can upgrade to a bivvy if you want. But just a space blanket is plenty. And they're, cheap at almost any big box store or camping store. You can look at what I'm talking about, a Mylar blanket. You probably still want to have a sleeping bag or something in your car, but just a grab-and-go kit. I have been stuck on the side of a mountain and had to use those things, and they do work, let me tell you. If you know what you're doing, you already have your clothing, which is not stupid choices like cotton or something like that. And obviously, if you live somewhere like New England or something like that, or Wyoming, a big proper coat ought to be part of your grab-and-go kit, I would imagine. Like we talked about, this is not a lot of stuff. Be remiss if I didn't mention a compass. Most of us already have cell phones and stuff nowadays. Ways to communicate that, the actual Minutemen back in the day could only have daydreamed about in fiction novels and dime novels of the day. Again, I'm going to circle back to more than the stuff, though. Train with it. I don't care if you have a $150 Remington 870 you got used at a gun show 10 years ago, back when you could get them used for $150. And like I said, a case of birdshot and a couple of slugs and a couple of buckshot that you've patterned. Maybe some number 6 shot in there in case you got to feed yourself. And you practice with it and you know it. And you know your holdover with a slug at 100 yards. If you have the money for a Daniel Defense, they're great rifles. You don't need a Daniel Defense if you have a Delton or Smith & Wesson M&P 15. Practice with it. Know it. Know whether it likes to be dry or likes to be wet. Guns can be very individual. Know how your gun runs. Know what kind of ammo it likes and what kind of ammo it doesn't like. You don't need a giant set of night vision goggles, but have a good flashlight. They're not expensive. Pick up a flashlight at Walmart probably that will blow people in World War II away with how good it was for $20. You can get a weapons light, sure, but if you know how to run a long gun and a handgun with holding a flashlight, it's very effective. Again, back to being ready. I'd rather have a man that has just a handheld flashlight and a Glock 17 that actually goes out and shoots at night or in low light or no light conditions and identifies targets. And the guy that has the, Surefire X300 and a dedicated weapon-mounted holster and everything that has never gone out and shot at night. So be ready. Jesus told you to be ready. Jesus told his disciples to have swords. But it's more than kit. Like I said, it's a mindset. You ever hear that old saying, it's not the dog in the fight, it's the fight in the dog. You could be the biggest bodybuilding muscly dude. If you don't have the will to fight, if you don't have that warrior spirit to fight through some blood and some broken bones, you need strength there first. Again, strength, spirit, soul, mind, and body. Watch and be ready. You don't know the day or the hour. The only remedy for that is to always be ready. So I'd say be circumspect. Are you a modern Minuteman? If not, do you feel called to be? I guess that's all I'll say on that. Guess we should roll into a few updates. By God's grace and provision and a lot of help from my wife, we do have merchandise now, so you can check that out at goodshepherdtraining.com. If you want to just fly the banner of the Alpha Male podcast, you want to show people tribe that you're a part of, we have Alpha Male metal coffee cups. I think are pretty cool. There's also some other stuff there, shirts. One with the verse we talked about, let him who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. Got a long sleeve shirt in there. I find that those thin long sleeve shirts are the best for me for shooting, especially out in the sun if you're going to be out all day running around on a range. Help stop little pieces of shrapnel when they come back at your body. Block the sun. If it's hot, they help keep you warm if it's cold. They don't tend to get in the way on the draw and things like that. They fit you properly. You roll up the sleeves. But there's a lot of cool stuff on there if you want to check that out. Again, goodshepherdtraining.com. If you like this podcast and the weapon stuff, you can go to Gunfighter Life. If you want to check out pictures of the podcast stuff, pictures of hunting, pictures of things like that, go to goodshepherdtraining.com. For the fraction of the cost of even a box of ammo or a fancy city cup of coffee, these podcasts are free for you to listen to, but they're not free to put out. So if you want to support the tribe, goodshepherdtraining.com. There's a link to Patreon on there. And a sincere shout out and recognition to those who do support. On a lighter note, a puppy update. For those of you who don't listen regularly, I this year was blessed to get a Rhodesian Ridgeback puppy. His training is coming along quite well. I've had a few dogs in life. Before this, I ran Akitas, which are also great dogs. This Rhodesian Ridgeback, I can easily say, is the best dog that I've ever had. His training is coming along well. Started last week. My wife and I paid to get a couple of professional training sessions. Somebody that teaches service dogs. He's got a second one tomorrow. My wife just got off the scale with him, and he is tipping the scale at 70 pounds. He is just shy of 5 months old. With that, I guess, roll into the tactical tip. A little thank you for staying tuned to the end of the podcast. We talked about all manner of kit. Let's talk a few quick thoughts on my training experience on body armor. You have your soft armor and your hard armor. I'd say unless you have a specific purpose, like your department makes you, or you really want to be in deep concealment, I would stay away from the soft armor. It's the more traditional soft armor. Kevlar vests are super hot and sweaty and uncomfortable. If you are going to go that route, my number one recommendation would be Citizen armor. They use like a microfiber nanotube technology that I don't even understand, but it works because I've shot it. but I would really recommend hard armor. It's come down a lot in price over the last few years. For me, that's my go-to armor. AR-500 makes really good armor. Even have carriers you can buy a whole kit. I wouldn't make that my first purchase. I wouldn't make that my second purchase. But if you're already well armed and you want to look at that, I would really recommend looking at some armor in the AR-500 armor. I'm talking about the company AR-500 armor. 500 also like a steel rating. I'm sure other companies make it. I'm just not as familiar with it. But that gives you quite a bit of good performance at a reasonable price that an average citizen hopefully can afford. You may have a specific reason you want something else, but my tactical tip is if you are looking at body armor, the AR-500 is hard to beat. Get it with a good minimalist carrier, meaning it doesn't restrict your movement. I would much rather be lightly armored and fast than look like a turtle running around or attempting to run around. My next tip is going to be on holsters. Now, I don't know if I mentioned in my bio because I plug it in. It's been a while since I've listened to it, but I am and have been for a long, long time an FBI certified firearms instructor, FBI certified handgun instructor. There's a thing in the holster world called the FBI cant, meaning the gun is canted forward. I know why the FBI does that. They do it for a specific reason. Mostly admin and administrators and investigators. They a lot of times wear a suit, and if you wear a suit, that can't make sense. If you don't wear a suit, it probably doesn't. And if you get one with the FBI cant, with the gun cannon forward, it's going to really give you some unnatural movements, in my opinion. Again, this is my opinion. You're going to have to cant your wrist at a weird, awkward angle and your shoulder at a weird, awkward angle, and then cant it right back again once you grab the gun and pull it out. One of the keys to being fast is not moving really, really fast. One of the keys to being a fast, accurate shooter is doing less. Doing the least amount of steps it takes to get that gun from on your hip to front sight on the target and squeeze the trigger. The less steps you have to do to accomplish that, the faster and more accurate you can be. Less to screw up, less steps to do in the first place. Unless you are running a gun that way, I would encourage you to make sure that your holster does not have the FBI cant, either straight up and down. I even prefer the other way, canted a little bit backwards. Anyway, check that out when you're looking at a holster. Make sure you pay attention to that. I think a lot of people get that because they hear FBI cant and they're like, oh, FBI, that must be super tactical. In fact, it's kind of for a situation that probably doesn't apply to you. Anyway, those are the tactical tips for the day. Thanks for listening, men. Get out there, be strong, prove yourself a man, and have a blessed day.